So I want to give some thoughts to Cat's Culture's viewers about the new Disney Marvel Fantastic Four movie. The first act of the film, I'll say, where a lot of it's about Franklin and getting to know the chemistry of the four of them. It it was really good. Specifically, the Fox ones, I felt like it was okay chemistry. It was a little corny at times. I think this movie, we were able to see how the four of them got along well. You would believe in the marriage between Reed and the woman, and and the four of them being friends together. And the other movies, the Fox ones, it felt like some of the jokes were very corny. In the beginning of this, I actually did find myself laughing a bit, having a good time with it. And it felt there was that Marvel sense in it, where there would be some moments where the film would do things like, aren't you going to be curious about this next thing? Or aren't you going to be curious about this next thing? And that was interesting. Going into the second act, I think is where it really stood out to me. First of all, the size of Galactus was incredible. I mean, Thanos was a character who you see on screen and you're like, okay, he's ominous, he's threatening, but Galactus took it to a different scale for sure. Um, I'm curious to know more about his backstory. I'm almost intrigued to read some of the comic books and learn more about how he went from just being an ordinary guy to having that helmet. And I don't mean to say helmet like a weak way, like it was a scary looking mask helmet thing he had, into, this planet devouring space god who transcends what a human existence would know. I found that very, very intriguing. And, the way he would speak to Sue, and that was, very direct. I want your child. I want Franklin. I don't know if he said I want Franklin by name, but if you've seen the movie, you'll get the point. And, the dynamic between the Silver Surfer being a female and Johnny, that was interesting. Um, I was a little surprised that they deviated from the comics and making the Silver Surfer female. It was cool. I thought it was a fun way to change it up. Something I hear a lot of people say, and I agree with, is that movies don't have to be exactly like the books. You want to make the best movie possible. That's the way to kind of get intrigued and into the story. And, the dynamic of, oh, of course, this kind of hotshot Johnny guy falls in love with the Silver Surfer girl. I thought it was an interesting angle. It was funny. It was cool. Um, and, also the second act of where, you know, I had heard before I seen the movie someone compare it to Interstellar, and I was like, no way, there's not going to connect this Marvel Fantastic Four movie to Interstellar. But then you watch the movie and you see that second act, and you realize that that where the four of them, they're in space and they're traveling through kind of whatever the solar system the Earth is in, into the solar system where Galactus would be. It was pretty incredible cinematography. And like, yes, I get it's CGI, it's a computer, but it looked really good. I didn't even see this movie in IMAX. I just saw this movie in regular, just a regular movie theater screen, and I was still blown away. And yeah, going back to my original point, I could see how someone would see this movie and compare it to Interstellar, specifically the second act, not the whole story of Interstellar, but just the space visuals of the second act. I can definitely see that being compared to Interstellar. And you definitely, what's interesting about the second act is that you definitely realize that this isn't just four people who they're family, they're friends, they get along, they crack jokes, but they like don't mess with them. That bond is strong. That bond is real. When Sue tells Johnny or Ben or one of them to kill her, and referring to the Silver Surfer character, I mean, that's when you see that this is like a mother in defense mode, willing to do whatever it takes to protect her child. And I thought that was very, very interesting. And what I'll say is, something I'll say was a negative about the movie. Okay, so in real life, I can't imagine Sue would go out there with her child in front of the whole world, knowing that everyone in the whole world wants to give up this baby to Galactus to save the entire existence and life on Earth. It didn't correlate well. It didn't make sense. We just saw in the second act how she was like, I'm not putting my baby in danger. I'm not going to let my child go near Silver Surfer. And then in the third act, it goes to this beat where she's going to go out in public where, someone could do a public attack, and she's a political figure. So of course she might have people who don't like her and try to hurt her baby, or just, do a bomb or something like that. And it just didn't track. So I didn't buy that character at that point in the movie would do that. And what I really didn't buy was that the people of Earth, or New York City in this alternate universe 1960s, would all look at this woman and listen to her talk and be like, yeah, okay, now I see why we're not going to give up the baby to save our lives. I mean, that wouldn't happen in the real world. People would be very upset about that sort of thing. They'd be like, screw you, Sue, screw your child, we're trying to save our lives. So that part kind of stood out to me as a negative. And something that didn't bother me that much, but I will also say was a negative for me, was how I thought the character of Ben, was underused. I thought they did a better job portraying Ben in this movie than they did in the Fox movies. Not that I thought they did a bad job. That was actually one of the standouts of the Fox Fantastic Four movies, especially the 2005, 2007 one with Jessica Alba, and I'm forgetting the actor who plays Ben in that movie, but it was a really good performance. And you got kind of like the pain and suffering emotionally he was going through, how, the three of his friends, obviously they just don't have an all rock exterior that the world sees. But this Ben, I like the gag of, the teasing. We're going to say it's clobbering time, but he doesn't say it's clobbering time. I would have liked to see him fight more. I know we got some shots of it, but it's something that I think, to me, what makes the character special is it's simple. He's just a big, strong rock dude. There's nothing like too high fantasy or too high magic about how his power works. It's more just about his brute strength that he got from the incident, which I guess that could be high fantasy or high science. But anyway, I would have liked to see more of that. But the third act with Galactus was incredible. I mean, seeing the size and scope of Galactus in the New York City was very good cinematography. I had heard from a podcaster that apparently they shot this final third act similar to how actually Star Wars would shoot some of its space scenes, this not being a space scene. But basically how George Lucas in the original Star Wars, he would make these very small miniature kind of like space things that would create a setting in space, spaceships or, space plants, whatever the terminology would be. I'm not quite sure. But So for this movie, and then you pretty much, first the Star Wars example I was talking about, you take the camera and then you put it at an angle where you're filming a miniature spaceship and you're putting around things that are even smaller than that. So by comparison, it makes it look like, oh, the spaceship is huge. That's similar to what they did in the third act of this Fantastic Four movie. Pretty much they had a miniature New York City, Manhattan, I guess, and then they would have just some guy in a boot walking around, stomping on the cars. There'd be miniature cars on a miniature street and so on. Very, very interesting. I didn't notice it at all during the film, but when I had heard that and now hearing it now, it makes me think, oh yeah, that totally did happen. That makes a lot of sense. I can kind of see it from that lens. Connecting it to the bigger MCU. So I think it's no secret the public consensus on Phase 4 and Phase 5 is that it got too confusing. Where the Infinity Saga took time to build up characters. We had a Captain America trilogy. We had a Thor trilogy. We had an Iron Man trilogy. There was 2 Guardians of the Galaxy movies. There were 2 Ant-Man movies before we got to the crescendo of Avengers Endgame. I really liked Phase 4 and Phase 5, but it didn't have that, where, the Loki show split the sacred timeline, but you're wondering, the way the multiverse is depicted in Loki isn't how it's depicted in Shang-Chi, or especially in Multiverse of Madness, and it's not depicted the same way in even Captain America Brave New World, where all you had in that movie was a tease in the post-credit scene where the guy with the brainy head is saying, he's just emphasizing the word world. So you would think that you would know that there's other worlds in this universe that they're going to go into. It was a tease. It's whatever it is. But, this, something a point I don't want to take credit for, I heard someone else say, this really felt like what a lot of the public was hoping Phase 4 after Endgame, where they could have gone. And what's interesting is, obviously hardcore fans of Marvel and superheroes know the Fantastic Four is Marvel's first family. So these characters, some people in the movies, like in 2012, we got the Avengers. In the real world, in our society, we see, oh, the Avengers was the first superhero team-up movie. Then DC did it. Star Wars started to do it. Everyone else started to do it. But in the comics, it was actually the Fantastic Four. I'm like 99% sure about this. Was the first Marvel family team up before the Avengers, actually. So it would have made sense, because, where do you go after Endgame? You go into Phase 4. A movie like this that shows you this is where we're going to go with the multiverse. We're going to go with Galactus, another, big bad villain who can handle the might of multiple heroes in this Marvel universe. And, what's interesting also is that this movie, despite it being big in scope, it had a singular focus: protect Franklin, protect Manhattan from anything bad that could be out there. And I think that's where the movie really, really excelled, as opposed to some of maybe Phase 4 and 5, where it's mixing introduction and there's a lot of other things happening in the movie. They don't have that kind of direct focus as much. So yeah, I'd say Phase 6 is off to a good start. Before I'd seen this movie, I had thought that the 1960s Manhattan we see was going to get completely destroyed, and then eventually to, like a lot of the 4 characters and that we saw in this 2025 Fantastic Four, a lot of the characters were going to just leave that universe due to Reed's intelligence and his understanding of how alternate dimensions work. for that reason, I would think that they were going to be like, well, there's like in our world, a lot of people dead. Let's go somewhere else, just kind of out of like desperation and loneliness, if you will. But I like the way they played it instead. The idea that, well, we see in Thunderbolts, I guess technically we don't know the exact reason, but I guess the headcanon I'm going to go into is that, I think that Reed is going to realize that are other threats out there, and he wants to protect Franklin because we know he's hyper focused on protecting Franklin from any kind of threat that could be out there. And he pretty much he wants to go into alternate dimensions, this kind of assess threats. And I think another way they could be pulled into it, so theory number 2, I guess I'm going into, is Dr. Doom, like in the post-credit scene, drags Franklin for his power. First of all, what power Franklin has, how big of a question that's going to be in the next couple years going into the future of Marvel. That could be an interesting angle too. I'm more inclined with my second theory. I think the reason the 2025 characters of this Disney Marvel MCU movie are going to go into a different dimension is because of something Dr. Doom does to Franklin without the parents' consent. Not kosher. It's not going to be cool by any means. And pretty much that's going to be the thrust into why that Thunderbolts post-credit scene, or mid-credit scene, I should say. Or maybe it was a post-credit scene for Thunderbolts. But, going into the third act of Fantastic Four, the 2025 one, that battle was incredible. I mean, the heart of it, the strength of each character, they communicated well. It had its moments. It teased, because they know everyone's wondering, how's this going to connect to Doomsday? We got Doomsday coming up. And so you're watching this fight, you're thinking, where's Galactus going to go? Is he going to, now we know he goes into a different dimension. Is that going to come up in Avengers Doomsday? Is that not going to come up in Avengers Doomsday? And also, what's interesting is that, I guess those are the points I want to make. That they teased the future of Marvel very well in that third act. And also that I guess so. I guess that's the point. Anyway, this is my thoughts, my review of the 2025 Fantastic Four First Steps. I think Marvel's in a good place going into the future. And the post-credit scene, the second one was kind of whatever. It was a cartoon. I thought maybe an older audience would like it. It wasn't for me. The first one with Doom teased the future of Marvel well. Great 3-act structure. There's heart, there's levity, there's funny moments. The movie felt natural. It wasn't corny. And I recommend everyone go see this movie. If you like anyone talking about nerd culture, the Marvel movies, DC movies, sports, Yankees, Rangers, Knicks, Jets, this is the YouTube channel for you. Cats Culture. Like and subscribe. Thank you.